The retired Navy SEAL nearly dropped his glass when I said one word. Reaper. The ice clinked against the side of his tumbler as his hand jerked. Water spilled across the white tablecloth. Conversation stopped. My cousin's grin slowly faded. The old SEAL stared at me. Not with confusion. Not with curiosity. With recognition. The kind of recognition that comes from seeing a ghost you thought you'd never meet. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then he whispered 2 words. My God. My cousin laughed. I didn't. Because I knew exactly what he remembered. And I knew exactly how badly the next few days were about to go for the people who had spent years treating me like a family joke. My name is Emma Carter. I spent 20 years serving my country. Most of my family still thought I spent those years pushing paperwork behind a desk. The truth was far more complicated. And on the afternoon of my grandfather's 70th birthday celebration, that truth began to crawl out of the shadows. The party was being held at my grandparents' ranch outside Billings, Montana. It was late summer. The fields beyond the house glowed gold beneath the afternoon sun, and the air smelled like dry grass and barbecue smoke. The entire family had shown up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, in-laws. And unfortunately, Ryan. Ryan wasn't technically my brother. He was my cousin. But growing up, he'd always acted like the older brother nobody wanted. Everything was a competition with him. Grades, sports, careers, money, attention. Especially attention. At 42 years old, Ryan still needed to be the loudest person in every room. He sold commercial real estate in Denver and talked about it constantly. How much he'd earned. What he'd bought. Who he knew. What deal he was closing next. The rest of the family loved it. Or at least they pretended to. I arrived wearing jeans boots and a simple navy blue shirt. Nothing about me stood out. I preferred it that way. The moment Ryan spotted me walking across the yard, his smile widened. Look who finally escaped the Pentagon. A few relatives laughed. I smiled politely. Good to see you too, Ryan. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder. Tell me something. Do they let you carry a gun in those office buildings? More laughter. I could feel familiar eyes watching me. Waiting. Seeing whether I'd react. For years I had learned not to. Military service teaches patience in ways civilians rarely understand. I simply picked up a glass of iced tea. Sometimes. Ryan grinned. Oh, she's dangerous. The conversation moved on. At least temporarily. I spent the next hour helping my grandmother carry dishes into the house and checking on my grandfather. Grandpa looked good for 70. Older, certainly. A little slower. But still sharp. He squeezed my hand. You staying long this time? A few days. His smile warmed. Good. That one word meant more to me than all the praise Ryan had ever received from the family combined. Because Grandpa had never judged me. He'd never demanded explanations for my absences. Never asked why certain deployments couldn't be discussed. He simply trusted me. And trust matters. Especially when you've spent years carrying secrets. Dinner began just after sunset. A long table had been set up under strings of lights. The ranch looked beautiful. Children chased each other through the yard. Music drifted from hidden speakers. The smell of grilled steak filled the air. For a while, everything felt normal. Then Ryan opened his mouth. He was sitting directly across from me. The worst possible position. He leaned back in his chair and pointed his fork toward me. So Emma, I knew that tone. Half the table knew it too. My aunt sighed softly. Ryan continued. Have you ever actually shot anyone? Several cousins laughed. A few people looked uncomfortable. I took a sip of tea, then answered calmly. Only the ones who shot first. The table exploded with laughter. Ryan slapped the table. Oh, that's good. More laughter. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because the truth usually sounds ridiculous to people who've never had to live with it. Ryan wasn't finished. Of course he wasn't. So what's your call sign? A cousin joined in. Yeah, don't all military people have cool call signs? The younger kids immediately loved the idea. Suddenly everyone was listening. I considered refusing to answer. That would have been smarter. But I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of minimizing my life to make other people comfortable. So I simply answered. Reaper? Silence lasted less than a second. Then came the sound. A violent cough. Everyone turned. At the far end of the table sat a broad-shouldered man in his late 60s. Jack Donovan, one of Grandpa's oldest friends. Former Navy SEAL. The water he'd been drinking sprayed across the table. His glass slammed down. His eyes locked onto mine. Every trace of color vanished from his face. The laughter around the table slowly faded. Ryan blinked. You okay, Jack? Jack didn't answer. He kept staring at me. A strange tension settled over the entire table. Finally he spoke. His voice sounded rough. "What did you say your call sign was?" I met his gaze. "Reaper!" The old seal leaned back. For a moment he looked as though someone had punched him in the chest. Nobody understood why. Nobody except me. Because I recognized the look. I'd seen it before. Men who survived things they never expected to survive often carried that expression. Ryan looked delighted. He thought something hilarious was happening. "Oh my God," he laughed. "Do you guys know each other?" Jack ignored him. His eyes never left mine. Not once. Dinner continued awkwardly after that. Conversations returned. Plates emptied. Dessert appeared. But I could feel Jack watching me the entire time. Every few minutes I'd glance toward him. He'd still be staring. Not rudely. Carefully. Like he was solving a puzzle. When the evening finally wound down, guests began drifting toward the house. I slipped away toward the back porch. The ranch was quiet. Crickets filled the darkness. The stars stretched endlessly across the Montana sky. I had barely stepped outside when I heard footsteps behind me. Jack. He stopped several feet away. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Almost reverently. "You were Reaper?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The years had changed his face, but I recognized the eyes. I'd never met him before, yet I knew those eyes. Because I'd heard the voice. Over a radio. Thousands of miles away. In the middle of a nightmare. I slowly nodded. Yes. Jack inhaled sharply. The old warrior's composure cracked. Jesus Christ. The words escaped him like a prayer. For several seconds he simply stared into the darkness. Then back at me. "You saved us." My chest tightened. I hadn't expected that. Not here. Not after all these years. Before I could answer, another sound drifted from the shadows near the corner of the house. A footstep. Someone had been listening. Jack heard it too. His head turned. So did mine. A figure moved quickly away from the porch. Toward the yard. Toward the remaining guests. Even in the darkness I recognized the walk. Ryan. And suddenly I had a feeling this family reunion was about to become something far more complicated than a birthday party. Jack Donovan did not chase Ryan. Neither did I. That was the thing about men like Ryan. If he had heard something small, he would turn it into something large. If he had heard something private, he would carry it into a public room and dress it up as entertainment. He had been doing that since we were children. Jack stood beside me on the back porch, his hands resting against the wooden railing. For a long moment he said nothing. The ranch lights behind us cast a warm glow across the grass, but beyond the yard, Montana was nothing but black hills and cold stars. "How much did he hear?" Jack asked. "Enough," I said. His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. For what? For saying it out loud. I let out a quiet breath. "You didn't do anything wrong." Jack looked older in that moment than he had at the dinner table. Not weak, never that. Just worn down by memories that had outlived the war they belonged to. "I never knew your real name," he said. "That was the point." He nodded slowly. "We tried to find out after." "I know." His eyes shifted toward me. "You knew." "Requests were flagged," I said. "Names stayed sealed, reports stayed clean, people moved on." Jack gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Nobody moved on." The words settled between us. From inside the house came the sound of laughter dishes being stacked, someone telling an old story too loudly. Normal family noise, safe noise. The kind of noise men like Jack had fought to preserve. He turned back toward the field. "It was Helmand," he said. I looked down at my hands. I did not need him to say more. But he did. 2009, October. We were attached to a joint task force chasing a courier through the valley. Intel said 12 fighters, maybe 15. He paused. There were more than 40. The night air seemed to cool around us. I could smell dust that wasn't there. Burning metal. Hot wiring. The sour bite of fear inside a dry mouth. "Your convoy got pinned near the wadi," I said. Jack closed his eyes. "So it was you." I said nothing. He swallowed hard. "We lost 2 vehicles in the first minute. Radio was half dead. Satellite link kept cutting in and out. We had wounded everywhere. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where we disappear." He rubbed one hand across his face. Then a woman's voice came over the net. I could hear it again. My own voice, younger, flatter, harder. "Reaper on station. Send grid." Jack continued. "You sounded like ice. Not scared, not excited, just exact." I leaned against the railing. I was scared. He looked at me. I was 26, I said. Everybody thinks calm means fearless. It doesn't. It means you put fear in a box and do the job anyway. Jack stared at the boards beneath his boots. You held that box tight. I remembered the operations center. The bluish glow of screens, men standing behind me, the smell of old coffee. My headset pressed so hard against my ear that it left a mark for hours afterward. I remembered the map, the valley, the moving dots, the red circles closing in. I remembered a voice yelling that they had wounded. Another voice saying they were low on ammunition. Someone praying without realizing the mic was still open. And I remembered giving coordinates. Again, and again, and again. Not because I wanted anyone dead. Because if I hesitated, Americans were going to die. Jack said, "We asked for air support. They said weather was bad, visibility was garbage, assets were being redirected." I know. Then you started moving pieces around like a chessboard. I almost smiled. A very ugly chessboard. You pulled a drone feed from one command air cover from another and convinced somebody with a lot more rank than you to give us a window. I was persuasive. Jack looked at me. You threatened him, didn't you? I did smile then, barely. I reminded him that dead Americans create paperwork generals don't enjoy. For the first time, Jack laughed. It was brief but real. Then his face sobered. You saved 17 men. I shook my head. I helped. No, he said firmly, don't do that. His voice carried the weight of command now. Don't shrink it down so other people can handle it. We were gone. Finished. You got us out. The porch door creaked behind us. I turned. My grandfather stood there. He had heard enough to understand that this was not casual conversation, but not enough to ask questions. Everything all right, he said. Jack straightened. Yes, sir. Grandpa looked from him to me. There was concern in his eyes, but also restraint. He had always known when not to push. Emma. I'm fine, Grandpa. He studied me a moment longer, then nodded. Your grandmother's looking for you. She saved you a piece of pie. That almost broke me. Not the memory of gunfire. Not Jack's gratitude. Pie. The simple tenderness of being remembered. I'll be in soon, I said. Grandpa nodded again and stepped back inside. Jack waited until the door closed. Does your family know anything? No. Nothing. They know I served. They know I deployed. They know I don't talk about it. And they mock you anyway. I looked toward the glowing windows of the house. They mock what they don't understand. Jack's mouth hardened. That's generous. It's habit. Inside, Ryan's voice rose above the others. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. Reaper. Secret missions. Saved a SEAL team. Then laughter. Jack turned slowly toward the sound. His expression changed. It was subtle but unmistakable. The old soldier was gone. The old protector had taken his place. He's telling them, Jack said. Of course he is. You want me to shut it down? For a second I considered saying yes. Then I looked through the window. Ryan stood in the center of the living room with a beer in one hand, performing for the family. My aunt covered her mouth like she was amused. One of my cousins shook his head. Someone else laughed. My grandmother looked confused. My grandfather did not laugh. Ryan caught sight of me through the glass. His grin widened. He lifted his bottle slightly as if making a toast. I knew that look. He thought he had found a new toy. A new story. A new way to make me small. I stepped away from the railing. No, I said. Jack frowned. No, let him talk. Emma. I opened the porch door. Warm air spilled out, carrying the smell of coffee and birthday cake. Ryan's voice cut through the room. Come on, Emma, don't be shy. Jack says half the Navy owes you their lives. The room turned toward me. Every face, every old judgment, every familiar doubt. I looked at Ryan and smiled softly. That's not what he said. Ryan laughed. Then tell us what really happened. I walked inside slowly. Jack followed behind me. And for the first time that evening, nobody at that birthday party seemed quite sure who held the room anymore. Ryan had always been good at turning discomfort into applause. When I stepped back into the living room, he looked pleased with himself. He stood near the fireplace beneath a wall of old family photographs, holding his beer bottle like a microphone. Around him, relatives had gathered in a loose half-circle the way people do when they know a show is happening but have not yet decided whether it is cruel. Jack came in behind me and closed the porch door. The click sounded louder than it should have. Ryan spread his arms. There she is, he said, our very own secret war hero. A few people chuckled, not many. My grandmother stood by the kitchen doorway holding a pie server in one hand. Her eyes moved from Ryan to me, then to Jack. She knew something had changed, though she didn't know what. My grandfather remained seated in his recliner, quiet as stone. Ryan turned toward the room. So apparently, while the rest of us were building actual lives, Emma was out there saving Navy SEALs under the name Reaper. He said it with a grin like the word itself was ridiculous. I walked to the side table and set my glass down carefully. Ryan, my Aunt Linda, said, "Maybe leave it alone." "Oh, I'm just asking questions." He looked at me. "That's allowed, right? Or is that classified too?" The room grew still. There it was. The old trick. Make me defend what I could not fully explain. Push me until silence looked like guilt. Then call the silence proof. I had seen men do it in conference rooms. I had seen commanders do it when they wanted someone lower ranking to take the weight of a decision. I had seen family members do it at Thanksgiving tables with gravy boats and plastic smiles. But Ryan had never understood one thing. Control is not the same as surrender. I met his eyes. "It was a birthday dinner," I said. "Not an interview." He laughed. "Convenient." Jack's voice cut in. "Careful." One word. Low. "Clean." Dangerous. Ryan blinked at him, surprised. "What?" Jack stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. I said careful. Ryan looked around, searching for support. "Come on, Jack. You can't expect us to believe some mysterious call sign story without details. You said she saved your team. That's a pretty big claim." I said what I said. "But there's no record, is there?" Jack stared at him. Ryan smiled again, encouraged by his own stupidity. "That's the problem with these stories. Nobody can check them. Nobody can ask for proof. We're all just supposed to nod and say thank you for your service." My grandfather's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. I saw it. Ryan did not. He was too busy performing. "Emma's been doing this for years," he continued. "Disappears for months, comes back quiet, acts like she's too important to talk about her job. Meanwhile, the rest of us actually show up for this family." That one landed. Not because it was true, because part of it felt true enough to hurt. I had missed weddings, funerals, Christmas mornings, hospital visits. I had sent gifts from airports and called from borrowed phones. I had let my grandmother leave voicemails I could not return for weeks. Service takes things. Some you give willingly. Some are taken before you know what they cost. I looked at my grandmother. Her face had softened with a sadness that had nothing to do with Ryan's accusations, and everything to do with all the empty chairs I'd left behind. "I know I wasn't always here," I said quietly. Ryan jumped on it. "See, she admits that much." I turned back to him. But absence isn't arrogance, and silence isn't a lie. For once he had no immediate answer. Jack moved beside me. "You don't know what she carried." Ryan scoffed. "Then tell us." "No." "Why not?" "Because you don't deserve it." The room inhaled. Ryan's face flushed. He hated being corrected. He hated being embarrassed. Most of all, he hated being made small in a room where he expected to be admired. "You know what?" he said, pointing at me. "Fine, let's settle this." My cousin Beth murmured, "Ryan, stop." But he was already too far gone. He pulled out his phone. "I've got a veterans charity event at my house next Saturday. Big crowd, actual military people, retired colonels, special operations guys, donors, people who know what they're talking about." Jack's eyes narrowed. Ryan looked at me with theatrical generosity. "You should come." I said nothing. He smiled. "Tell your Reaper story there, in front of people who can ask real questions." Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. My aunt whispered, "This is unnecessary." Ryan ignored her. "Unless, of course, you don't want that kind of attention." I could have refused. I should have refused. A wiser woman might have gone back to her hotel, packed her bag, and driven away before dawn. I had done enough for one lifetime. I owed this family no performance, no explanation, no proof. But then I looked at Grandpa. He was watching Ryan with the tired disappointment of a man realizing that age had not made his grandson kind. Then he looked at me, not asking me to fight, not asking me to win, just seeing me. And that was enough. I turned to Ryan. "What time?" His grin faltered. He had expected anger, defensiveness, excuses, not acceptance. 7, he said. "I'll be there." The room went silent. Jack turned his head slightly toward me, not questioning but warning. I understood. This kind of thing could go wrong in a dozen ways. It could reopen old wounds. It could drag classified shadows too close to civilian light. It could hand Ryan another stage. But I also knew men like Ryan. They only stop when the room finally stops laughing with them. The rest of the birthday evening faded after that. People avoided my eyes. Some offered polite goodnights, others hugged me a little too tightly as though apology could be delivered through pressure and perfume. Ryan left smiling. Jack did not. He walked me to my truck. The gravel crunched under our boots. The air had cooled. Somewhere beyond the fence, horses shifted in the dark. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No." That was honest. I opened my truck door but didn't get in. "I won't discuss anything classified." "I know. I won't prove myself for entertainment." "I know that too." "Then why are you worried?" Jack looked toward the road where Ryan's taillights had vanished. "Because men who need to expose other people usually have something rotten hidden under their own floorboards." I followed his gaze. That sentence stayed with me all week. And by Saturday night I would learn exactly how right he was. Ryan's house sat on a ridge outside Denver. All glass walls and sharp angles, the kind of place built to impress strangers more than shelter a family. By the time I arrived Saturday evening, the driveway was already lined with luxury SUVs, polished pickup trucks, and a few government-looking sedans that told me Ryan had not exaggerated the guest list. He wanted an audience. He had gotten one. I sat in my truck for a moment before going in. The last light of day lay across the mountains like copper. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady but cold. I had worn a dark blazer, gray blouse, jeans, and boots. No uniform, no medals, no ribbons. Nothing Ryan could turn into a costume for his little trial. The house glowed against the dusk. Through the windows I could see people moving inside with wine glasses and small plates. Older men with military posture stood in clusters. Their shoulders were looser now, their hair silver or gone, but the habit remained. They faced doors. They scanned rooms. They laughed with one eye still measuring distance. I knew that look. I took one breath, got out, and walked toward the front door. Ryan opened it before I could knock. "Emma," he said warmly, too warmly, "you made it." I said I would. His smile tightened. He wore a tailored navy suit and the expression of a man about to enjoy himself. "Come in, everyone's excited to meet you." That was a lie. Most people inside had no idea who I was. But Ryan intended to fix that. The charity event was supposedly for veterans' housing support. There were framed photographs on easels, donation cards on high tables, and a silent auction arranged near the fireplace. It might have been sincere once, but Ryan had wrapped it in himself until the cause felt like decoration. He guided me through the crowd with one hand hovering near my back, not touching but claiming control. "This is my cousin Emma," he announced to a group of men near the bar. "Army officer, served overseas." The men nodded respectfully. One said, "Thank you for your service, ma'am." I nodded back. "Thank you." Ryan's grin widened. "Ask her about her call sign." The man glanced at Ryan, then at me. He was older, maybe early 60s, with a Marine Corps pin on his lapel. His expression cooled slightly. "Call signs aren't party tricks," he said. Ryan blinked. I almost liked him immediately. Before Ryan could recover, another voice came from behind us. "Emma Carter." I turned. A tall man with a gray beard stood beside the dining room entrance. He wore a dark sports coat, but he carried himself like command had never left his bones. "Colonel Matthew Rains, retired." I had not seen him in nearly 9 years. For one second, time folded. Then he smiled. Not broadly, not casually, with quiet recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Carter." I walked toward him and shook his hand. "Colonel." His grip was firm. Still too formal. Old habits. He studied my face for a moment and something softened in his eyes. "You look good." "So do you, sir." "That's a lie, but I'll accept it." A few people laughed. Ryan did not. He had expected strangers, not witnesses. Colonel Rains looked past me toward Ryan. "Your family." Ryan recovered quickly. "Cousins. Very proud of her service, of course." I could feel the lie settle in the room like smoke. Rains looked at me. I said nothing. That was enough. His expression changed by a fraction. Ryan clapped his hands once. "Actually, this is perfect. Colonel, maybe you can help us settle something." "Settle what?" Ryan turned, gathering nearby guests with his voice. "Emma told the family her call sign was Reaper. Jack Donovan said she saved a SEAL team. Pretty dramatic stuff. I figured tonight with actual military men in the room, maybe we could hear the real story." The silence that followed was not confused. It was disciplined. Several heads turned. At the edge of the room, I saw Jack Donovan step in from the patio. He must have arrived before me. He met my eyes briefly, then looked at Ryan as if watching a man step onto thin ice. Colonel Rains placed his glass down on a side table. "Who told you that name?" he asked. Ryan's confidence flickered. "She did." Rains turned to me. I gave a small shrug. Dinner conversation got strange. Jack came forward. "Her cousin made it strange." Ryan laughed. "Gentlemen, come on, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just saying if someone claims to have this mysterious legendary call sign." "Stop talking," Rains said. 2 words. The room froze. Ryan's mouth remained slightly open. Rains did not raise his voice, but every officer in the room heard the command inside it. "You are walking through a door you do not understand," he said. Ryan's face reddened. "With respect, Colonel, people exaggerate military service all the time." "They do," Rains said. "But not her." A murmur moved through the room. Ryan looked at me angry now. "Then prove it." I felt tired. Not frightened. Not embarrassed. Just tired in the deep places. "Ryan," I said, "you invited me here hoping I would either look like a liar or break down trying not to. Neither is going to happen." His eyes narrowed. "I asked for proof. You don't have the clearance for proof." A few of the veterans exchanged looks. They understood. Civilians often thought that sentence meant arrogance. Soldiers knew it sometimes meant a graveyard of things never written where families could read them. Ryan scoffed. "That's convenient." Before I could answer, the front door opened again. The conversation near the entryway fell quiet first. Then the silence spread. An older man stepped inside wearing a dark suit, silver hair combed back, posture straight despite his age. I knew him immediately. Major General Arthur Whitcomb, retired. The last time I had seen him, we were standing in a secure operations center at 3 a.m, watching a rescue mission unfold one breath at a time. Ryan rushed toward him. "General Whitcomb, thank you so much for coming." Whitcomb nodded politely, then looked beyond him. His eyes landed on me. The entire room seemed to shift. He walked past Ryan without another word. Straight to me. I stood taller without meaning to. "Major Carter," he said. The title pulled a sharp breath from someone nearby. Then the general extended his hand. I took it. "General." His voice was calm, but his eyes held memory. "I heard someone was asking about Reaper." No one moved. Ryan's face emptied. Whitcomb turned slightly so the room could hear him. "I cannot discuss operations. I will not confirm classified details. But I will say this." He paused, letting the weight of every word land exactly where it belonged. "Major Emma Carter is one of the finest officers I ever served with. There are men alive today because she stayed calm when everyone else was running out of options." A silence unlike any I had ever heard filled that house. Not awkward. Not confused. Heavy. Respectful. Jack Donovan stepped beside me. His voice was rough. "My team was one of them." Across the room, Ryan looked smaller than I had ever seen him. For once he had no joke ready. No clever line. No crowd to rescue him. He had brought me here to expose a fraud. Instead, he had exposed the limits of his own character. Then, Colonel Rains looked toward the silent auction table, where Ryan's name was printed in gold beneath the words, "Honoring our veterans with integrity." Rains's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "I've been meaning to ask about that." Ryan went pale, and I realized Jack had been right. Something rotten was hidden under the floorboards. The moment Colonel Rains said those words, I saw something change in Ryan's face. Not embarrassment. Fear. Real fear. The kind that appears when a person suddenly realizes the conversation is moving toward a subject they cannot control. A few minutes earlier, he had been the host, the center of attention, the man directing the room. Now he looked like someone watching a storm roll toward his house while pretending not to notice the dark clouds. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Major General Whitcomb picked up a glass of water from a nearby table. Colonel Rains folded his arms. Jack Donovan stood beside me, and Ryan desperately searched for a way to regain control. He forced a laugh. "Well, that's certainly an endorsement." Nobody laughed with him. That was when he knew. The room had changed sides. Not because people suddenly loved me. Because credibility matters. Especially among older Americans. Especially among veterans. Especially among people who have spent their lives learning how to recognize character. Ryan tried again. "I'm glad Emma's getting the recognition she deserves." The sentence sounded rehearsed. Artificial. The room heard it too. General Whitcomb looked at him for a long moment. Then he asked a simple question. "How much money has tonight's fundraiser raised?" Ryan blinked. The question had clearly caught him off guard. "Excuse me." "The fundraiser." Whitcomb glanced around the room. You've mentioned veterans several times tonight. Ryan smiled nervously. Of course. How much has been raised? Ryan swallowed. Around 40,000. Good. Whitcomb nodded. And where exactly is it going? The room became very quiet. I noticed several donors exchange looks. One woman lowered her wine glass. Another man frowned. Ryan laughed again. A little too quickly. Veterans housing initiatives. Which ones? The smile weakened. Several. Names? Ryan hesitated. Only briefly, but long enough. Long enough for everyone to see it. Colonel Rains stepped forward. I've wondered about that myself. Ryan turned toward him. What does that mean? It means I've seen your advertisements. The room became even quieter. I've seen the photographs. Rains nodded toward several framed military photos displayed around the room. Photos Ryan frequently used in promotional material. Photos supposedly connected to military partnerships. Veteran outreach. Charity campaigns. Patriotic business branding. Things that looked impressive to clients. Ryan crossed his arms. So, Rain's voice remained calm. Some of those photos were taken during operations that weren't publicly released until years later. Ryan's face drained slightly. I noticed it. So did everyone else. Jack noticed too. Interesting, he said quietly. Ryan immediately became defensive. What's that supposed to mean? Jack looked directly at him. It means somebody gave you access to things they shouldn't have. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. The room was watching now, not casually, carefully, the way people watch a loose thread unravel from an expensive suit. General Whitcomb set down his glass. Let's make this simple. Ryan nodded quickly. Please. The desperation was becoming obvious. Whitcomb continued. You've repeatedly implied close relationships with military leadership. Ryan smiled weakly. Professional networking. You've claimed advisory connections. Informal conversations. You've used military credibility to attract investors. Ryan's jaw tightened. Several people in the room visibly reacted. Investors. That word mattered. A lot. Especially to the people standing there. Colonel Rains spoke next. And several of those investors happened to be standing in this room. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because now everyone understood. This was no longer about me. Not even close. Ryan had spent years using military prestige as a sales tool. He wasn't pretending to be a veteran. That would have been obvious. Instead, he had done something subtler. Something smarter. Something harder to catch. He implied proximity. Access. Connections. Influence. Enough to impress people. Enough to close deals. Enough to make himself look important. The problem was that tonight he had accidentally invited people who knew the truth. One older businessman slowly shook his head. I invested in the Colorado project because you claimed support from retired command staff. Ryan immediately pointed toward the general. I know General Whitcomb. Whitcomb's expression didn't change. No. The word landed like a hammer. I met you once. A second investor spoke up. You told us you worked closely with special operations veterans. Ryan's voice rose. I support veterans. That's not what you said. Another voice joined. Then another. Then another. Questions began coming from every direction. Ryan's confidence cracked. Completely. His answers became shorter, less coherent. Sweat appeared along his forehead. I simply stood there, watching. Not enjoying it. Not celebrating. Just watching. Because revenge is rarely as satisfying as people imagine. Most of the time it looks like truth finally catching up. Nothing more. Nothing less. My grandfather used to say something when I was young. If you spend years building a house out of lies, don't act surprised when the first honest wind knocks it down. I thought of that now. Ryan kept talking. Trying. Explaining. Defending. But nobody was listening anymore. The damage was already done. One investor quietly asked for his business card back. Another requested documentation. Several exchanged numbers. The room was reorganizing itself around facts. Ryan had lost control. And everyone knew it. About 20 minutes later, people began leaving. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Almost worse. They simply walked away. Trust disappearing one conversation at a time. By 10 o'clock, the house was half empty. Ryan stood near the fireplace staring at the remaining guests. The confidence was gone. So was the arrogance. For the first time in my life, he looked tired. Human. Small. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Jack walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. How you doing? Fine, he smirked. That's military for something. Probably. We stood together in comfortable silence. A little later, General Whitcomb approached. So did Rains tell you? I frowned. Tell me what... The general smiled. Several men drove here tonight after hearing rumors you might attend. I looked surprised. Why? Jack laughed. Seriously. Before I could answer, the front door opened. 3 older men entered. Veterans. I knew immediately. One walked with a limp. Another carried himself like an old infantryman. The third stopped the moment he saw me. His eyes became glassy. For a second, nobody moved. Then he walked straight toward me. You probably don't remember me. I already knew what he was about to say. He smiled. You saved my life. The room disappeared. Not physically. Emotionally. Everything else faded. He pulled a photograph from his wallet. A family picture. A wife. 2 daughters. A grandson. He pointed at them. Because of that day, I got to meet all of them. My throat tightened. I couldn't answer. Not immediately. Another veteran stepped forward. Then another. Stories followed. Memories. Names. Moments. Lives that continued because somebody had done their job on a day that could have ended differently. For years, I had carried those missions like files. Coordinates. Reports. Numbers. Now they had faces. Grandchildren. Gray hair. Wrinkles. Entire lifetimes. And somehow that felt heavier than combat ever had. Near midnight, Grandpa approached. The room quieted. He looked at me for a long moment, then at Ryan, then at everyone else. His voice was soft. But nobody missed a word. For years, he said this family celebrated the loudest person in the room. Silence. Grandpa continued. We should have been honoring the bravest. Ryan lowered his eyes. Nobody defended him. Nobody argued. Because deep down, everyone knew Grandpa was right. A little later, I walked outside. The night air felt cool against my face. The stars stretched endlessly overhead. Behind me, the front door opened. Jack stepped outside. Hey, Reaper. I turned. He smiled. Not the smile of a Navy SEAL. Not the smile of a veteran. Just the smile of a grateful man. Good to finally meet you. For the first time all night, I smiled back. You too. As I walked toward my truck, I thought about all the years I'd spent staying silent. Maybe silence had protected secrets. But tonight it had also revealed something else. The people who matter don't need your stories to respect you. Character eventually speaks for itself, and truth has a way of arriving exactly when it's needed. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family only for the truth to come out later? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day, and we'd be honored to have you join us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.